Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about some recent news about the Superman legacy casting, and obviously that we're getting introduced to a Guy Gardner, a Hulk Girl, a Mr. Terrific, and Metamorpho, which Guy Gardner, to be fair, I know nothing about, very little about Lanterns in general, but I know next to nothing about Guy Gardner. I'm slightly familiar with Hulk Girl because of the animated Justice League series and Justice League Unlimited, along with Legends of Tomorrow. And then Mr. Terrific I'm familiar with because, or at least a version of that character, because I think there's multiple people who've taken up that moniker. One version of that character in Arrow, and Metamorpho I know nothing about. So obviously for this video I want to talk about this larger conversation. It's a really interesting conversation about how people feel about the introduction of these characters, because now for people they were like, whoa, are you trying to do too much? Like, I was just hoping to get a straight up Superman movie, which James Gunn has responded to that and has kind of alleviated at least some worry, but I think it still exists for some people. Like I said, it's an interesting conversation, because for people it's like, I want just a straight up Superman movie with him and Lois, but now you're introducing all these other characters and we don't know how large of a part they're going to play in the movie, and you're just going to be throwing these characters at us, which I think is understandable, because the DCU is being set up in a means of, it's not like, okay, we're starting with Superman and that's all that's in this universe. It's like, let's not forget, we're going to have a Batman in this universe who already has Damian Wayne, which obviously the conversation is, well, if he's already got Damian, that means at the bare minimum he's going through a potential, a Dick Grayson, potentially a Jason Todd, a Tim Drake, maybe even a Barbara Gordon. We don't, it's meant to be that this universe is lived in, because a large conversation too is we don't know how far into his career Clark is. We just know he's already working. Well, I think we already know that he's working at the Daily Planet in this particular continuity, because it's interesting, because if you haven't seen My Adventures with Superman, it's an animated series on Adult Swim. I highly recommend you check it out. It's a really dope almost anime stylistic approach to Superman's story, because in that continuity they're handling his origin story a lot differently, because obviously in that he's already had his powers for a while, but even that's kind of being handled in an interesting way. I don't want to give too much away, but at the beginning of that series, okay, we're only like 3 episodes in at this point in time, Clark and Jimmy just got hired at the Daily Planet as interns, and even Lois isn't even a reporter yet. She's still an intern herself. She's just been there longer than Jimmy and Clark, obviously. So it's that type of thing of like, right, and Clark becomes Superman, and basically, slight spoilers, but not really, the second episode is when he kind of dons the suit for the first time. So that ends up being that conversation of, oh, in this movie, will Clark have already donned the suit, had his outing as Superman, or will we see his first outings as Superman, first donning the suit? Questions like that, we just don't know where everyone's story lines up in the continuity and everything, right? But also these other characters, we don't know how much of the movie they're going to be in. Are they going to be in kind of almost like cameo type of roles? Will they be in extended kind of supporting cast roles? Because like your main supporting cast is most likely going to be like a Jimmy and a Perry White, but your main core cast is going to be I don't know, because I don't know if Jimmy's going to be part of like the main core cast or not, like, or whether he's just going to be one of those like supporting characters like a Perry White or something. But it's going to mainly focus on Clark and Lois, but that also focuses on, Clark's Kryptonian side and his human side, but also not even just the Kryptonian side of things, but him as Superman. So I think you kind of have to balance things out with like, okay, we're getting the human side of things, but to really show Superman shine, you also have to kind of put him in a world where superheroes are already a thing, that maybe that sets him even further down his path, whether they go the more traditional like truth, justice, and American way type of values, or whether it be the more modern way of truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. I mean, it's all about the same thing, but it makes him more American-centric versus like more worldly-centric, and that whole conversation. These other characters being established showcases like, here's Clark's way, here's how they handle it, which the way people have talked about some of these characters, they could probably go about things in a little, like, hey, they get the job done, but maybe they're not the most friendly, they don't handle things like the best way. But here you could have Superman, this pillar of hope, this light in the darkness that could showcase people that there is a better way to handle this, how to do, so he could end up coming, clashing with other superheroes who want to do things their way, who think they know it better. It's like, yo, kid, here you are, like, step into us. We've been doing this for a while. Like, you're the new kid on the block. Who are you to really challenge us and tell us, you know, or like believe that you're showing us? And that ends up being an interesting conversation of, will it be preachy type of Superman, or will he go, no, I will lead by example. I won't try and tell you what you're doing is wrong, but it's a clashing of values of how you want to handle things versus how I want to. It's like, once again, at least the way my understanding, knowing nothing about Guy Gardner, most people have been like, yeah, he's the douchebag. Like, he's a good guy, but he's a douche. So, and that Hawk Girl can, like, handle things in a very, like she's very steadfast in her own way, and maybe Mr. Terrific thinks himself really smart and like, oh, I know what I'm doing, like, don't try to tell me what to do. So I think that's going to be this interesting dichotomy where it's like, right, you're trying to handle things on the human front, you're battling your own, like, human life versus your Kryptonian life, and you divide that even more by having his superhero life kind of bumping heads, and not necessarily bumping heads, but, you know, being lumped in with other established superheroes in this universe, and that the relationship that they have versus, like, the relationship this world has with superheroes and how they have the superheroes have with each other. So it's an interesting thing, and that's kind of something that James Gunn was kind of trying to, like, say, like, that's what this casting is about, because these other characters are meant to kind of balance out that Superman side of things, kind of give you this compare and contrast. Obviously, there's the rumors about the Authority. I think James Gunn has said, like, right, I never said the Authority was going to be in this. It might be a thing of, I mean, there might be no mention of them, or maybe they are already a pre-established thing, or maybe they are going to be a thing established in response to Superman, you know, depending on, like, how... I don't know if Waller is, I don't know anything about the Authority. I don't know if Waller ever has any connection with setting up the Authority like she does Task Force X, aka like the Suicide Squad and stuff. I don't know if she's 100%, but she's usually the behind the scenes person, so it could be a thing of she kind of puts that team together in response to whatever goes down in Superman Legacy, and all these other heroes following behind Superman might make Waller go like, all right, we already had a superhero issue. I don't trust this Superman. We need some contingencies in place. We need people we can control who will fall in line and do what we want to. Maybe it's like, hey, these other heroes won't fall in line, and now we got another one who's on this, like, God level power who won't fall in line. That's why we got the Authority. So, you know, stuff like that is what I'm kind of curious to see how it flows and plays out. I think that contrast is going to be a really, really interesting comparison to really have in this universe, like I said, between, like, what other people want Superman to be versus people who kind of want to go their own way, and how that bumps up with what Superman values and how he plans on going about things. He's kind of a small fish in a big pond, because it's like, yeah, I mean, once again, we don't know how long he's been living in Metropolis, but he's kind of introduced on a city stage, or maybe even the world stage, as Superman, and, you know, how you juggle all of that while you are at the same time coming to terms with who you are, and so on these three different facets of who you are: Clark Kent, Kal-El, and Superman. So, you know, and how they all influence each other, but also how they all differentiate from each other. It's such an, like I said, interesting dichotomy that I'm really excited to kind of break down. So, like I said, I understand where people's concerns are, like, oh, we're just kind of throwing these people in here. We don't really know how much are you going to background establishing you're going to do. Once again, who knows how long they're going to be in the movie. I'm even using Hawk Girl, for example. I don't know if it's known out there or not. Do correct me in the comments down below. But I don't think we know which version of Hawk Girl we're going to get. There's the more... I guess it depends on which age of comics you're pulling from, but I think there's the version of the character where it's like, okay, this is potentially an Egyptian curse, because I think that's where it was in Smallville and the Arrowverse with, like, Legends of Tomorrow. That was an Egyptian curse that basically they die and reincarnate her and Hawkman. Kind of like a Romeo and Juliet thing they got going on. But then there's the other side of things where it's like, there's the other storylines where they're aliens, Thanagarians. So that's the one they use in the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited cartoon. But I think that's also from the comics as well. I think that Thanagarian one gets used a bit more. I think that's the more modern take of Hawkgirl. My understanding, once again, I could be wrong, do correct me. I think the Legends of Tomorrow one now, in retrospect, I think blended a little bit of the two. It definitely leaned into like the reincarnation element, but I want to say there was also a little bit of like, oh, the Thanagarian alien thing, but it never, like, obviously they were only in one season of the show, so that was never really pushed too much further, but it felt like they were kind of combining the two continuities, but like I said, I might be misremembering. Go the Thanagarian route, like, oh, she's an alien, that kind of plays even more in Clark's circumstances, like, hey, I'm not the only alien. I mean, versus like a Guy Gardner being like, oh, I'm a human, but I'm, you know, so like there's so many like elements, like I said, you could really play with depending on what like continuities and like how they can compare and contrast, how Clark himself compares and contrasts of like, okay, they're doing things a certain way. Maybe it's not even like a, oh, like I believe I can do things better. It might just be like, maybe I feel a little inadequate. Like, once again, I'm the new kid on the block. They've been handling this for a while. Like, what is my role? Where's my place in this world across, once again, the different facets of who this character is? So obviously, these are just some of my thoughts. I'd love to get to know your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think about the castings? I didn't really talk about it too much. I just kind of focused on the characters themselves. But what do you think about the actors that were chosen to play these respective characters? But also the introduction, the inclusion of these characters, I should rather say, not necessarily introduction. Introduction and inclusion of these characters in this movie and potentially what their roles could be in comparison to the rest of the story. I'd love to get to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.